You're worthless. Absolutely worthless. The words echoed through the busy coffee shop as my supervisor, Jerome, stood over me, his face red with rage. Pack your things. You're fired. I sat frozen in my chair, my laptop still open with the presentation I'd been working on for weeks. The Ender cave had gone silent, every pair of eyes fixed on our table. My cheeks burned with humiliation as Jerome continued his tirade, completely oblivious to the audience he'd created. 3 years I've wasted on you, Belinda. And what do I have to show for it? Nothing but mediocre work and missed deadlines. You're a drain on this company, and I should have gotten rid of you months ago. My name is Belinda Martinez, and I'm 37 years old. Until 5 minutes ago, I was a senior project manager at Driftsade Limited, a mid-sized manufacturing firm in Portland, Oregon. I dedicated 3 years of my life to this company, working 60-hour weeks and sacrificing my personal life to meet impossible deadlines. But apparently, none of that mattered to Jeremy Walsh, my direct supervisor and the most toxic person I'd ever encountered in my professional career. I tried to speak to defend myself, but Jerome wasn't finished. Don't even think about asking for a reference. Who would hire someone as incompetent as you anyway? The woman behind me at the neighboring table shifted uncomfortably, and I caught a glimpse of her designer suit and perfectly styled gray hair. She was probably in her 50s with an air of authority that commanded respect. I wished I could disappear into Theffler as Jerome's voice grew even louder. You think you're so smart with your little innovations and process improvements. Well, let me tell you something. Ideas are worthless without execution, and you can't execute anything properly. That stung more than anything else. Had saved those innovations he was mocking had saved Driftsade Limited over to 0.000 in the past year alone. I'd streamlined their entire quality control process and developed a nuclear management system that had increased efficiency by 30, but Jerome had always taken credit for me work, presenting my ideas to upper management as his own brilliant insights. My hands trembled as I closed my laptop. The familiar weight of impostor syndrome crashed over me like a tidal wave. Maybe Jerome was right. Maybe I really was worthless. Maybe I'd been fooling myself all these years, thinking I had something valuable to contribute. The coffee shop remained dearly quiet as Jerome gathered his things, still muttering under his breath about my supposed incompetence. As he stormed toward the exit, I finally found my voice. Jerome, wait. He spun around, his eyes blazing with contempt. Save it, Belinda. There's nothing you can say that will change my mind. You're a donny. As the door slammed behind Jerome, I sat there in stunned silence, feeling like my entire world had just collapsed. The other customers slowly returned to other conversations, but I could still feel their sympathetic glances. My coffee had gone cold, and my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold back up. Working at Driftsade Limited had been my dream job when I first started. The company specialized in helping manufacturing businesses optimize their operations, and I'd been excited to apply my engineering background and process improvement expertise. I'd earned my master's degree in industrial engineering from Oregon State, graduating summa cum laude, and I'd spent years honing my skills at smaller firms for landing this position. But from day one, Jerome had made my life miserable. He was the type of manager who took credit for success and blamed subordinates for failures. He'd assign me impossible projects with unrealistic deadlines, then publicly criticized me when I couldn't deliver miracles. I'd watched him destroy the confidence of countless talented employees, driving them to quit one by one. The worst part was how he'd systematically undermined me work. Last month, I developed a revolutionary inventory tracking system that could have transformed how our clients manage their supply chains. I'd spent weeks perfecting the algorithms and testing the software, working late into the night to ensure everything functioned flawlessly. When I presented it to Jerome, he dismissed it as too complicated and shelved the project indefinitely. But then, just 2 weeks later, I'd overheard him pitching a remarkably similar system to our biggest client, describing it as his own and Novata solution. When I confronted him about it privately, he'd laughed in my face and told me to prove it. Of course, I had no recourse. All my work was technically company property, and Jerome had conveniently lost all documentation linked me to the project. That incident should have been my wake-up call to start looking for a new job. Beauty'd been too invested in the work itself to walk away. I genuinely believed in what we were doing at Drift Shade Limited. Our clients were small to medium-sized manufacturers struggling to compete with larger corporations, and my process improvements could genuinely help level the playing field. My personal life had suffered tremendously during my time at company. I'd barely spoken to my friends in months, declining invitation after invitation because I was always working. My apartment was a mess because I spent more time at the office than at home. I'd even turned down a date with David, a charming architect I'd met at my neighbor's barbecue because Jerome had mandated I work through the weekend on a project that ultimately went nowhere. Now sitting in this coffee shop with my career in ruins, I wondered if it had all been for nothing. Had I wasted 3 years of my life chasing an impossible dream? Had I really been as worthless as Jerome claimed? I was still lost in my thoughts when I heard a gentle voice behind me. Excuse me, but I couldn't help overhearing what just happened. I turned around to face the woman who'd been sitting at the table behind me. Up close, she was even more impressive. Tall and elegant with intelligent greenies and a warm smile that seemed genuine. She extended a perfectly manicured hand. I'm Victoria Ashworth, CEO of Velwyn Education. May I sit down? The name hit me like a lightning bolt. Victoria Ashworth was legendary in Thebazinus world. A self-made billionaire who'd built her educational technology peer from the ground up. I'd read about her in Forbes magazine just last month, where she'd been featured as one of the most innovative leaders in the industry, and she was asking to sit with me. Of course, I stammered, gesturing to Jeremy's abandoned chair. I'm Belinda Martinez. Victoria settled gracefully into the seat, her presence immediately transforming the atmosphere and our table. Belinda, I have to tell you, what I just witnessed was absolutely appalling. No employee deserves to be treated that way, especially not in public. I felt tears threatening to spill over. Thank you for saying that. I'm not sure I believe it myself right now. Well, you should, Victoria said firmly. Because worthless people don't create the kind of innovations I was reading about on your laptop screen. My eyes widened in surprise. You could see me presentation. She smiled. I have excellent eyesight, and I couldn't help but notice the elegance of your inventory management algorithm. That kind of sophisticated thinking doesn't happen by accident. It requires real talent and deep understanding of complex systems. I stared at her in disbelief. In 5 minutes, this stranger had recognized the value in my work that Jerome had dismissed for 3 years. You really think it has potential? Potential? Victoria laughed. Belinda, what you've created there called revolutionized supply chain management for small manufacturers. The real-time analytics alone are worth millions. She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a crisp white business card. I'd like to make you an offer. Velwyn Education has been looking to expand into manufacturing consulting, and we need someone with your expertise to head up the division. My heart started racing. You're offering me a job, but you don't even know my qualifications. I know enough, Victoria interrupted. I know you're brilliant. I know you're dedicated, and I know you've been undervalued. More importantly, I know you have the courage to innovate, even when your ideas aren't appreciated. She leaned forward, her eyes intense and sincere. That man was right about one thing. Ideas without execution are worthless. But he was completely wrong about you. You don't just have ideas, Belinda. You execute them beautifully. And I want that kind of talent on my team. I took the business card with trembling hands. Victoria Ashworth, Chief Executive Officer, Velwyn Education. Her direct phone number was printed in gold letters at the bottom. Think about it, she said, standing up. But don't think too long. Opportunities like this don't come around often. 2 days after the coffee shop incident, I sat in my small apartment staring at Victoria Ashworth's business card for the 100th time. Part of me couldn't believe it was real. That one of the most successful business women in the country had offered me a position based in a 5-minute conversation. But another part of me, the part that had been systematically crushed by Jerome Sabus, whispered that it was probably too good to be true. I'd spent the weekend researching Velwyn education extensively, and everything I learned only made the opportunity seem more incredible. The company had started 15 years ago as a small educational software startup and had grown into a multi-billion-dollar empire spanning online learning platforms, education accounting, and technology development. Victoria had built it all while maintaining a reputation for treating employees well and fostering innovation. Monday morning arrived with Portland's typical gray drizzle, and I found myself walking past the drift shade limited offices on my way to the coffee shop where I'd been working on my resume. I wasn't sure why I'd chosen this route. Maybe some part of me hoped to run into former colleagues who might have heard about my firing. What I saw instead made me blood run cold. Through the large windows of the conference room, I could see Jerome presenting to what looked like our biggest client, Westbrook Manufacture. He was standing in front of a larger screen displaying my inventory management system, the one he'd called too complicated, just weeks before. I ducked into the alley beside the building and pulled out my phone, quickly dialing my former colleague Patricia, who worked in the accounting department. She picked up after two rings. "Belinda, oh my God. We heard what happened. I'm so sorry." "Patricia, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Is Jerome presenting me inventory system to Westbrook right now?" There was a long pause. "How did you guys?" "He is." The meeting started in Harago. "Belinda, I'm so sorry. Everyone here knows it was your work, but nobody wants to say anything because of the afraid of Jerome." I finished. "I did it. But Patricia, I need you to do me a favor. Can you send me a documentation that proves I developed that system? Emails, project files, anything." Another pause. "I could get fired for this. You could also help expose a fraud," I said quietly. "Jerome has been stealing credit for my work for years, and now he's about to make probably millions from my innovation while telling everyone I was worthless." "Give me 20 minutes, Patricia said finally. "I'll see what I can find." True to her word, Patricia sent me a zip file containing months of email correspondence, project timelines, and development logs that clearly showed I was the sole creator of the inventory management system. My name was on every document, every code comment, every design specification. Jerome's involvement had been limited to approving project milestones and providing budget authorization. But as I scrolled through the files, I discovered something even more shocking. Patricia had included financial projections for the Westbrook deal that he'd never seen before. If Jerome successfully sold my system to Westbrook, it would be worth over $5 million in initial licensing fees, plus ongoing maintenance contracts worth millions more per year. And according to his presentation materials, he was planning to position this as just the beginning, a prototype for a larger product suite that could be sold to dozens of other manufacturers. My innovations weren't just being stolen. They were being turned into the foundation of an entirely new business division at Driftshead Limited. Jeremy was about to become a hero to upper management while I remained unemployed and humiliated. The irony was devastating. For 3 years, I'd watched Jerome take a read it for smaller projects and had convinced myself it wasn't worth fighting about. But this was different. This was my life's work being repackaged as someone else's genius. And the financial stakes were enormous. I sat in that alley for another hour, watching through the window as Jerome meckermed the Westbrook executives with my technology. He looked confident and successful, every inch, the innovative leader he'd always pretended to be. Meanwhile, I was hiding in an alley like a criminal, afraid to even be seen near my former workplace. That evening, I called Victoria Schwartz's direct number. My hands were shaking as I dialed, and I almost hung up twice before she answered. Victoria Schwartz, Miss Ashworth. This is Belinda Martinez. We met at the coffee shop on Friday. Belinda, I was hoping you'd call. Have you given my offer some thought? I took a deep breath. I have, and I'm very interested. But before we discuss terms, there's something you need to know about me situation at Drift Shade Limited. He told her everything. The years of stolen credit, Jerome's systematic abuse, and what I'd discovered about him presenting the inventory system as his own work. Victoria listened without interrupting, occasionally making soft sounds of disapproval. That's absolutely unconscionable, she said when I finished. Intellectual theft is not just unethical, it's illegal. Have you considered pushing legal action? I've thought about it, but I'm not sure I have their sources for a legal battle. Jerome has the backing of the entire company, and I'm just one unemployed engineer. Not anymore, Victoria said firmly. Belinda, I want to make you a proposition. Accept my job offer. We'll discuss salary and benefits tomorrow, and Velwyn Education will provide legal support to help you reclaim credit for your work. We have an excellent legal team and they specialize in intellectual property cases. My heart was pounding. You'd really do that for me? I'd do it for anyone in your situation, but especially for someone with your talent. What Jerome is doing is exactly the kind of behavior that drives innovation out of companies. It can't be allowed to stand. We arranged to meet the next morning at Velwyn Education's Portland offices. I spent the night researching intellectual property law and preparing a timeline of every project Jerome had stolen credit for over the past 3 years. By morning, I had a comprehensive dossier documenting a pattern of systematic theft. The Velwyn Education building was stunning, a modern glass structure in the Pearl District that screamed success and innovation. Victoria met me in the lobby personally, dressed in an immaculate navy suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Welcome to Velwyn, she said warmly, leading me to the elevator. I want to show you something. We rode to the 15th floor, where Victoria led me through a maze of open-plan offices filled with young, energetic employees working on contingent projects. The atmosphere was completely different from Drift Shade Limited. Collaborative-minded of competitive, innovative instead of stagnant. This is where our manufacturing division will be based, Victoria said, stopping in front of a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. If you accept my offer, this will be your office. I stared through the glass spacious room with its modern furniture and stunning view. It's incredible. The salary is $2,000 annually, plus performance bonuses that could easily double that figure. Full benefits, stock options, and a research budget of $500,000 to develop your ideas. I nearly fell over. My salary at Driftshade Limited had been $75,000, and Jerome had constantly complained about the cost of basic supplies. There's just one condition, Victoria hinted. I want you to fight for your intellectual property, not just for you, but for every innovator who's been influenced by bullies like Jerome. Will you do it? Looking out at the Portland skyline from a future office, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Hope, not just for myself, but for justice. Yes, I said, I'll do it. Within a week, I'd officially started at Velwyn Education and felt like I'd entered a completely different world. My new colleagues welcomed me warmly, and I was amazed by the collaboratives Victoria had created. Instead of the cutthroat competition I'd experienced at Drift Shade Limited, everyone here seemed genuinely invested in each other's success. Victoria had assigned me to work with Thomas Brennan, Velwyn's head of legal affairs, on building our intellectual property case. Thomas was a sharp, methodical lawyer in his 40s who specialized in corporate fraud cases. He reviewed all the documentation Patricia had provided and immediately identified several clear violations of employment law. This is more than just stolen credit, Thomas explained during our first meeting. Jerome has been systematically pop your intellectual property and using it to generate revenue for his company. That's actionable fraud. Meanwhile, I threw myself into developing the manufacturing consulting division. Victoria had given me complete autonomy to design our service offerings, and I was finally able to implement all the innovations I dreamed about during my time at Driftshead Limited. I hired a small team of brilliant engineers and began reaching out to potential clients. But our real breakthrough came when Thomas discovered something unexpected during his investigation. He'd been researching Driftshead Limited's financial filings and found discrepancies in their reported revenue streams. Belinda, look at this, Thomas said, spreading documents across his desk. According to their tax filings, Driftshead Limited has been licensing your inventory management system to multiple clients for the past 6 months, not just Westbrook, at least 8 other companies. My stomach dropped. That's impossible. Jerome just presented it to Westbrook last week. That's what made me suspicious. Thomas interrupted. So, I did some digging. It turns out Jerome has been secretly selling your innovations to clients while telling you they weren't viable. He's been running a side business using your intellectual property. The implications hit me like a physical blow. While Jerome had been publicly humiliating me and calling my work worthless, he'd been privately profiting from it to the tune of millions of dollars. The betrayal was so complete, so calculated that I felt physically sick. There's more, Thomas continued grimly. I found evidence that he's been manipulating project budgets to hide their revenue. Some of these licensing deals have resulted in bonuses for the entire team, but Jerome has been pocketing the money. Can we prove all of this? Absolutely. Corporate financial records are public and client contracts are documented. Jerome thought he was being clever, but he left a paper trail a mile long. That afternoon, Victoria called me into her office. She'd been following our investigation closely and had her own news to share. I've been making some calls, she said with a mischievous smile. It turns out several of my contacts in the manufacturing industry have been approached by Driftshead Limited about licensing your inventory system. They had no idea the technology is stolen. My eyes widened. What did you tell them? The truth. There's more, Thomas continued grimly. I found evidence that he's been manipulating project budgets to hide their revenue. Some of these licensing deals have resulted in bonuses for the entire team, but Jerome has been pocketing the money. Can we prove all of this? Absolutely. Corporate financial records are public, and client contracts are documented. Jerome thought he was being clever, but he left a paper trail a mile long. That afternoon, Victoria called me into her office. She'd been following our investigation closely and had her own news to share. I've been making some calls, she said, with a mischievous smile. It turns out several of my contacts in the manufacturing industry have been approached by Driftshead Limited about licensing your inventory system. They had no idea the technology is stolen. My eyes widened. What did you tell them? The truth. That the real innovator behind the technology was no working for Velwyn Education and that they could license the genuine improved version directly from us instead of dealing with fraudulent copies. And Victoria's smile grew wider. 3 companies canceled their contracts with Driftshead Limited this morning.